as if the things I just told you weren't bad enough, and they are horrific in and of themselves. The drug dealers, they've outdone themselves by making things even worse. They have now added a veterinary sedative, tranquilizer, analgesic medication called xylazine that they use to chemically immobilize huge animals like horses and cows and steer and oxen. So like after surgery, they give them this powerful drug and it knocks them out, and they don't have to like even restrain them or watch them because they're so blotto that they don't have to worry about them moving for a long time. This has been around for decades, and we never worried about anybody taking it because it's never been approved for human use. And why in the world would we? You know, we don't worry about people drinking Drano, you know, it's just something that you don't do. But the drug dealers figured out that if they took just a little bit of this and they added it to those powerful synthetic opioids, then it would make the drugs last longer and it would make them more potent. And a little added benefit they figured out after a while was that it is also incredibly habit forming. And so after the person takes it for a relatively short period of time, when they stop taking it, the withdrawal is so terrible, it kicks in within hours, and it is so unbearable that it drives them right back to using again. And the folks who are taking this stuff are worthy of our pity, and it's really horrible. I have to warn you, some of the images I'm going to show you are really graphic. Right? But if you've seen like The Walking Dead, you see like the walkers or the zombie movies, the folks who are taking this stuff literally look like they're staggering around in this complete oblivion, or they're just like standing and like leaning in weird positions, or just like face planted against the wall or against the ground. I mean, it is really bad. These are pictures of folks they're under the influence of this stuff. And some of these were taken on the East Coast, some were taken on the West Coast, but it doesn't matter where they're being taken, the effects are the same. Now, another added bonus to this stuff is that because xylazine is a very powerful vasoconstrictor, it means it squeezes the vein shut. When it's injected, it squeezes the artery shut. And again, remember, this is designed for huge animals, not for little humans. The places where these people are injecting, it squeezes the artery shut for so long that it chokes off the oxygen and glucose, and it causes cell death or necrosis. And so these people start getting these flesh-eating wounds. Again, I'm not going to stand this long, but I want to show you. When I talk about them looking like The Walking Dead, this is really what's going on. By the time these folks have interventions, the wounds are often so bad, the infections are so bad, that they have to have amputations and skin grafts. Okay, you guys can open your eyes. Skin grafts and amputations before they can even begin working on the recovery. This may seem like it's a big sudden all of a sudden thing. It didn't just suddenly emerge. We've been getting urgent threat warnings as clinicians for the last couple of years about this, but I wasn't overly concerned about it when the warnings started coming out because it was primarily a coastal problem. It was popping up in cities from Florida up to Maine, from Washington down to California. And I was really hoping and praying that this stuff would go the way of bath salts or crocodile, if you guys remember that stuff, 10 years ago. That it was so horrific that people would just, learn their lesson, leave it alone, and it would burn itself out. That didn't happen. It kept, year by year, it kept marching further and further inward towards the heartland. And last year, I started getting really concerned because I noticed that it had gotten as far as Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh isn't far from here. Last July, Journal of the American Medical Association published a research project that was conducted in conjunction with Millennium Health, which is an incredibly well-renowned research institute. organization. The methodology for this study was that when patients showed up at community-based medical centers, whether it was a hospital or a triage center or stat care or a community-based behavioral health center or addiction treatment center or crisis center, when they showed up, they would undergo a urinalysis. And if they tested positive for fentanyl, then those specimens were shipped off to Millennium Health to go through a secondary testing for the presence of xylazine. Because obviously standard testing don't test for xylazine. Why would they? And this was no small undertaking. They tested over 50,000 specimens from across the country. And what they found was that nationally, on average, 30%, over 30% of the specimens that tested positive for fentanyl also tested positive for xylazine. In Ohio, that number bumped up to 34.6%, more than 1 in 3. Down around the Cincinnati area, down in Hamilton County and Clermont County, it was over 70%, more than 2 out of 3. And it is here in Stark County, it's here in Summit County. I've talked to the folks directly who have worked with them. And this isn't just some think tank worry stuff. For those of you who know me know I'm not an alarmist. I don't just say shocking stuff just to have something to talk about it. There's plenty going on. But this is not backroom hushed conversation stuff. This is front page of the Columbus Dispatch. I know a lot of people are burying their head in the sand about the news for the last couple of years, but this is bad. It's really bad. And perhaps the worst thing about it is that it is not responsive to Narcan. Because remember, Narcan only works on opioids. All that Narcan does is create a barrier between the opioid drug in the bloodstream and the opioid receptor in the brain. It just creates a little barrier there so they can't connect. They can't connect, the overdose stops. The person can start breathing again, and then they get to a medical center where they can be observed in case the Narcan wears off before the opioid does. But remember, 3 out of 4 people who would have died otherwise survived because Narcan was around. Xylazine is not an opioid. It's a tranquilizer sedative. Narcan doesn't work on those. And so as more and more of these formulas are being comprised of xylazine, then they're going to be less and less responsive to Narcan. And I am horrified, I am scared to death that it's going to get to a point where there's so much of the xylazine that displaces the opioids in these drugs that the overdose numbers are just going to explode. I am telling you that from the bottom of my heart. So what I want to ask of you is to please talk to your kids, talk to your loved ones. Tell them not to take anything from anybody who isn't you, your spouse, or a doctor or a nurse. Nothing. They can't afford to be wrong, not even once. Remember, 1 pill can kill. I know sometimes people are saying, "Oh, it's too early to start talking to them about that stuff and all this." You know what? You can have age-appropriate conversations about these things. The other side of that coin, that 1 pill can kill. I also was told by a parent that you can either warn them or mourn them. It's horrifying.